record. Fabulous. Okay, hello everybody. My name is Elion. I am a talent acquisition specialist for diverse talent and also the program coordinator for Reach, which I know is why our audience is here. We are celebrating April by highlighting access to sustainability, and we have Jennifer Gremmert here, the CEO of Energy Outreach Colorado. She is also one of our Reach advisors. We're very lucky to have her on the team. She's prepared a presentation for us, so you're in for a special treat. This is going to be a new way for us doing cultural stories, so I'm really excited. And Jennifer, thank you for taking the time. So I'm just going to pass it over to you. Let us know who you are, how you got involved with your organization, and how you relate to the topic of sustainability.
Sure. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure to get involved with Reach over the last year and a half or so. So my background is I've worked almost exclusively in the nonprofit sector. I've been with Energy Outreach Colorado for 24 years. I started my career doing fundraising for universities, and I moved to Colorado to work for an organization called Up With People, which was an international organization that was great, and it really got me connected internationally. But also, my focus has always been fairness. I grew up, my father was actually a warden of a prison. I grew up on the grounds of a prison, which is very interesting. But my father came to corrections through education rather than sort of criminal, criminal justice. So really, always understood that there was, families in the world that were being treated unfairly, and that their situations, were unjust. And I kind of recognized that from a young age, and really learned, while there's many, many people that have more than me in my growing up in privilege to some extent, there's so many more people that have less. So that's really been the motivation for most of my career, and focused on how do we make systems and structures better. Energy Outreach Colorado was created, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. I have just a couple of slides just to kind of make some introductions around this. And let me know if that's it's working well.
Yep, it looks great.
Okay. And I'll just forward this. So we were created in 1989, really to fill in the gaps for some of the public programs that provided energy assistance in Colorado. The Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, which we know as LEAP in Colorado, and the Weatherization Assistance Program. And so our mission is to really lead a network of both private and public entities to sustain Colorado's, affordability for Coloradans around energy, so that all Coloradans can afford their energy needs. And I think what's so interesting when we think about sustainability, it's sort of, how do we build for the future so that everyone can thrive, is how I've thought about it. And I have a somewhat of a nuanced perspective around this, because we know a lot around the environmental community that's focused on carbon reduction, of understanding what sort of our industrialization of our planet has meant sort of for the future, how we need to be thinking about that. But I'm actually thinking about it also from the consumer perspective. And so how does energy come into our homes? We think about how it's generated, but also how are we using it? What are the different tools we can use, from both rate design to program design to education, to really make sure that everyone can thrive in this energy transition. And there's a lot of tension, which is kind of some of the things I'll talk about. And so just over our arching of Energy Outreach Colorado is that we're here to help you. We have bill payment assistance programs where we work statewide. We have an emergency repair and replacement program for furnaces that's connected to the LEAP program. We work very closely with the state offices. We work very closely with utility companies. We manage large-scale energy efficiency programs. We work, and I'll talk more about our community solar garden sort of as the innovation piece of what we're doing. Lots around education. Any of you that are Xcel Energy customers may have noticed we now have time of use rates, which means your energy is being billed based on when you use it, as much as it is how much you use. And that's a huge shift. And as part of that, like, sort of sustainable effort that we do of long-term thinking around this, is advocacy both at the Public Utilities Commission, which is the regulatory body that oversees sort of the largest number of utility customers in the state, as well as the Colorado General Assembly, which creates laws that then flow through to the commission or either the Public Utility Commission or the Colorado Department of Health, Public Health and Environment. Sometimes we work with that through air quality programming. So that's kind of us in a nutshell.
Fabulous. Thank you. I'm just going to bring it back for a quick second. I like just what you said about kind of your upbringing and how it's very much the perspective that you view what work you do, whether it's explicitly with energy outreach or any of your previous roles and or future roles, just how perspective, how you can view a situation. And I think that that's important to recognize, viewing it through a lens of I want to help people, and it's not, I don't know, not negative, it's positive, and the ability to see change there. So I really love that. And thank you for that intro. Okay, first question I have for you is, what are the primary challenges faced by low-income communities in Colorado when it comes to accessing sustainable energy resources? And how does Energy Outreach Colorado address these challenges?
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about energy burden as kind of the framing around this, because when we think about energy, we want it to be affordable, we want it to be reliable. Anyone that experienced an outage, a couple weekends ago, that was kind of a preemptive, move from Excel because we had wildfire mitigation risk because of high winds, recognizes, or anyone that went through any kind of outage, you really understand what that means for households. But we also want it to be clean. We want our energy and all the things that we're thinking about. So it's really a three-legged stool. From the solution side, there's the generation of reducing fossil fuels through closing down of coal plants, limiting natural gas generation, increasing renewable energy, both wind, solar, other geothermal, other kinds of technologies. We look at it from a building perspective, so residential, commercial, large industrial buildings that emit energy, and then transportation, which is why we're seeing such a growth in, focus on electric vehicles, both charging infrastructure and just getting folks off of using gasoline, right? So when we think of it, Energy Outreach Colorado is what is the percentage of income that people use to have to pay for these costs? We have mostly focused on it from the utility bill perspective, which is the home, right? But you can also think about this from, if we're going to help someone convert to an electric vehicle, how can we think about like reducing their, having to purchase gas in conjunction with purchasing a new, maybe higher cost vehicle. So we're constantly thinking about this from a holistic perspective. But what's important to recognize is that 1 in 4 Coloradans struggles to pay their utility bill. This was pre-COVID, it exacerbated after the pandemic, but it really does, it's part of this whole challenge. We have a complete income inequality in this country, that we have the rich getting richer and people are not getting ahead. Wages are not appropriate. We have increasing costs on the healthcare, childcare, food, everything we can look at, housing. And energy is also right along there. We're seeing dramatic increases in energy costs. And some reason for that is not only like volatility of just the commodity markets, but that as we're trying to transition to new energy in futures, bills are going up in order to pay for that. It's really either taxpayers paying through programs that are public assistance or other kinds of subsidy programs, or ratepayers that are paying for that through utility bills. So we think of that, and then we recognize, what does that mean for households, that they're spending a higher percentage on their income, they're going without in order to do that. If you think about, again, preventing disconnection is a primary goal, right? We know, what bills do you pay? You pay your mortgage, your rent, water, food, utilities. Those are the critical things you need. So what are people doing without? And then we also know that the housing stock that exists in this state and across many places in this country are just not adequate, to meet the needs. They're leaky, they're old, there's mold, there's dust, And if there's not appropriate kind of thought about how that moves forward, that can be a real challenge. And I'll just show this map, which kind of reflects energy burden across our state. The dark blue is counties and communities where people pay more than 10% of their income for energy. And if you look at Southern Colorado, part of the challenge there is and Eastern Colorado is lower average median incomes. When you look at a lot of the lighter colors are Metro Denver, resort communities. We still, like in the San Luis Valley, Conejos, Castillo, Saguache, and Alamosa counties, 25% of the people we help use wood or propane as their primary heating source. And so those are really expensive fuels, frankly. And so what we're challenged with is it's what's happening in the movement, and I'll talk more around electrification, which you're hearing, of replacing existing combustion systems using natural gas in homes with all electric systems that are more efficient. But the challenge we're having is that the cost to run those systems is more expensive. We, as a production state in Colorado, have really affordable natural gas, except for when we don't, like last winter. And so that volatility of the market is challenging, but we're in a place right now where natural gas costs are low. We have production, there's some stability in international and national markets, but that makes this whole conversation we have of the governor and so many other folks, rightfully so, looking at doing this big transition of carbon reduction. You need higher utility costs to make that new technology more affordable. And so there's just an inherent tension in this. And so when you have two groups that are trying to force change amongst one another, you have the environmentalists trying to really limit the production of oil and gas, and you have the oil and gas community saying, you're wrong, we need to protect ourselves. That tension creates all the political challenges that we have. And EOC sits right in the middle of this, trying to think all of those things can be true. We have to change our environment. We have to think about this from a structural way, while we have to protect all of these households, because we know the historic damage of massive transitions have often left out the most vulnerable households from a disproportionate state, whether it's race, whether it's geography, where there's completely sort of just saying, well, this is a greater good, we have to just move forward. And that's kind of where we're sitting right now, which is really interesting. I mean, again, I've been at EOC for 24 years, and our organization is almost 35 years old. So these are not new challenges. They've just accelerated so dramatically. And there's a ton of money coming into this space through the Inflation Reduction Act, and so much more attention on disproportionately impacted communities, as there should be. If you live in Commerce City and have that Suncor and I-70, frankly, all those cars driving by your neighborhood every single day, you have more impact. There needs to be something done more, greater, better. But again, there's a lot of tension as those things roll out, and how much do community members have an input in what those changes are versus what's being just sort of thrust upon them through large public policy conversations.
Interesting. I'm honestly shocked by the energy burden map. I did not think it would
Yeah.
be, but so how often is this energy burden map kind of reevaluated, or do we really see that dramatic of changes happening often that like you would need to resurvey this, if that makes sense?
Well, we actually get this through the Department of Energy. So this
Okay,
is
gotcha.
information that's tracked across the country,
Wow.
done annually through surveying. So you take the census data, you kind of overlay that with energy costs, and then you look at, again, Colorado has 65 utilities,
Yeah.
right? So some are rural electric cooperatives, some are municipal
Yeah.
utilities. So you're looking at propane costs, you're looking, I mean, all of it weighs in. And then we're looking at, this is focused on area median income as a percentage, which is really important consideration. For a long time, federal poverty level was used to determine public assistance. But if you think about, if you live in Summit, Eagle, Pitkin, even La Plata counties, your costs are significantly higher than if you live in other counties. And so we have to think about that, because there is a geographic difference, and that median income makes a difference in terms of how public subsidized programs come into each community.
Interesting. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for showing this. This is, I'm sure quite a few of our viewers will be surprised by this too, but very good information for us to have. Okay, next question. Can you elaborate on some of the specific programs and initiatives implemented by Energy Outreach Colorado to promote sustainability and energy efficiency among underserved populations in our state?
Absolutely. I do really quickly just want to say this is our energy assistance program number. So I pulled the numbers kind of the last couple of years, and just to show the growth. We've dramatically increased funding coming out of the pandemic to help support that assistance program. And the average income of our programs on the energy assistance side are 21% of area median income, which is significantly low. This is important is that these 28,000 households, for example, that we served last year can then feed into our energy efficiency and sustainability programs. So that's sort of the crisis, like making sure people, we're meeting them where they are. But then when we think about sort of the holistic approach that we have is people come into our program through either a crisis service, bill assistance, and then we try to connect them into energy efficiency programs, whether those are programs that are run through the Colorado Energy Office, that are sometimes run by utilities. We manage a lot of different contracts for like the city and county of Denver, for example, and all the utility companies. And then across the state, like Platte River Power Authority are the cities of Fort Collins, Estes Park, Longmont, Loveland. So we're really always trying to braid different funding sources together. That's kind of the magic that we've been able to do. But if you think of sustainability, it's like we support people through the emergency assistance and then we try to stabilize them. And these programs really came out of understanding when we're paying really large arrearages for people and we were looking at why are these bills so high, it's really because of the housing stock. And so when you think about all of the programs that we administer across the state, so our, Colorado Affordable Residential Energy Program, as with any other nonprofit, we love acronyms. That CARE program is we facilitate, so if someone doesn't qualify for weatherization, or for whatever reason, weatherization is limited in terms of like they can't serve anyone that was served more than 15 years ago. There's different rules. We kind of have opened up these new opportunities. So this is a single family program. I'm going to talk more about the Healthy Homes program. We do multifamily affordable housing. So this is a program we've been doing for over 15 years. So if you think about our families that receive energy assistance, 75% of them are renters. So what we noticed years ago was that we wanted, and a lot of folks pay their own electric bill, even though you're living in an apartment. How do we make sure we reduce those costs while making those units more affordable? Again, we were working with a lot of older adults, and if they're in apartments that don't have cooling, for example, that's a help. So we have that program. We have a nonprofit energy efficiency program. So this serves commercial properties like homeless shelters, transitional housing, food banks, administrative offices of all of our partner agencies. One of the great things that we've been able to do is we have over 110 other nonprofits that actually administer our program. So people come into those offices like a Catholic Charities, like a Salvation Army, or La Puente, down in Alamosa. They're receiving other kinds of assistance. That's where they get their energy assistance. And so those organizations serving, the needs of the community hadn't had any funding to be able to do their own energy efficiency. And if you think of like organizations are so mission driven, their biggest asset may be the building that they operate out of, but it's not their expertise, right? Like facility management and thinking. So we've been calling it more like a concierge service where we're helping, like looking at your utility bill. When we first started this, we had a lot of partners that were paying sales tax on their utility bill, but they're exempt because they're nonprofit. Like just really working through all of that. We do lots of education programs. Like I said, we have these solar garden subscriptions, which are offsetting those increased costs as we electrify, really figuring out more renewable energy options. And then we're doing more around transportation. So when we're going in and doing like a multifamily building retrofit, We've also brought in partners to do water efficiency. So we replace, so they'll do the toilet replacement. We'll be able to fund them to do the aerator and waters, which reduces their water usage. Like we're always
Yeah.
trying to like figure out when we're in a building, right? So because it's disruptive, if you're in a home having to go in, we have to do an assessment.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we're installing insulation, replacing lighting, replacing systems. Sometimes we're having to like replace electrical panels in bigger buildings. When we're doing some of this work, we're having to go in unit. And all that has to be coordinated, respecting where people are again,
Yeah.
making sure we're meeting their needs both on a language perspective, on a
Mhm.
understanding if they're vulnerable populations. There may need to be additional, chemical sensitivities of things that we're installing in homes. All of that needs to be communicated, talked about. And it's really easy to say, oh, these are just, these programs can be easily done. Well, when I started this, I didn't realize how hard it was to give money away sometimes,
Yeah.
right? Like I know it makes sense, like we're gonna come in and do all this work, it's gonna save you money, but there's always a process,
Mhm.
and so that's what we've learned over time is how do we make that better? How do we make sure the funding comes smoothly in and isn't disruptive? Um, so yeah, so that's how we've done these programs over time. And I'll just run through the benefits again. This is really a preservation program.
Yeah.
The Colorado Housing and Finance Authority manages the tax credits in our state. And those tax credit programs can be maybe 10, 15, 20 years. When those tax credits expire, we need to make sure that that housing stays affordable,
Mhm.
because the temptation of any building owner is to say, the rates in Denver have gone up so much. Why don't I maximize
Yeah,
that, right? It's my
absolutely.
right to do. And so how can we layer on these dollars to improve their housing stock? Resiliency, I mean, we're seeing this more and more, and unfortunately, wildfires, wind. If you think about it, if the wildfire, we actually did a ton of work in the homes that weren't burnt down, because that smoke damage that got into people's drywall and insulation all had to be replaced around, in the communities around
Yeah.
it. So there's just so many different places where this happens. And I think we're seeing more, Colorado, when I moved here 30 years ago, you didn't necessarily have to have air conditioning. You could open your windows at night. But if there's a wildfire, you can't open it. You
Mhm.
can't open your window. Or if you're in a community that isn't safe and you don't feel like you can do that, or it's too expensive. And so we've got to think about how do we make sure that these are all coming into play. There's a lot of non-energy benefits that come from this work, in terms of reduce, if you're cold at night, it's hard to study, it's hard to sleep.
Mhm.
People may be getting sick more, work, missing school, and then all the consequences that come from that. And so what we're trying to do is like data approach, looking at health benefits. That's kind of where our Healthy Homes program is going. On top of all this, when we do efficiency, we are reducing carbon. We're
Mhm.
reducing the amount of, the sizes of the systems. We're, improving the energy efficiency. We're reducing kilowatt hours used and therms used. And we really do see this as the long-term structure as we start to scale this more and more of overall health and safety for our citizens.
Absolutely. And I feel like the development of programs also really speaks to what you said earlier, where sustainability isn't just implementing a program, hoping it's successful for that moment. It's about that trickle down effect. How are we seeing this long-term affect everybody? And with that, I'm sure more and more program ideas come along because new technologies come into place, or like you said, transportation's now getting pretty heavily involved in how are we taking on these new intersections and adapting them into our framework and creating programs that do reach, specific peoples or demographics? So it's that's a heavy lift. That is a heavy lift.
Well, and electrification is a really interesting conversation, because installing a heat pump is very different than sort of replacing one furnace with another, like one gas furnace with
Mm,
another gas furnace. There's a lot more technology considerations and
yeah.
how people use that technology that requires a lot more ramp, and I think the other thing is, it's no building is the same, like
Yeah.
depending on the age or what work has been done, or how people use it. Like, I'll never forget when we first started this, there was a transitional housing project, and we did a full retrofit. It was in the Baker neighborhood, and were tracking the energy usage year over year. And the first year we saw like 30% reduction. It was amazing. And then year two, we saw a 10% increase from the original. And it
Oh,
was like, what happened? And it literally was the community living in this housing went from men to women. And when we were doing
wow.
surveying, women cook more. They use more electric appliances. They use hair dryers.
That's
I
so
mean, it was
interesting.
literally like, and again, I was fairly, I knew enough to be dangerous, but I don't have an engineering degree or anything. And you're like, what? Like and those were things that we just didn't anticipate because you're like,
Totally.
doing the measurement based on what you know. And those, so these are the things we have to like, okay, let's dig into it. Let's not call it failed because
Hmm.
it increased. It's just, okay, now we need to do more education.
Yeah. Interesting. Huh. What I wouldn't have thought of that
I
either,
know.
but that
I
does make sense totally. Wow, what an interesting kind of switch up. Dang, they were really sucking that energy. They made a big difference there. That's kind of funny. Fabulous. Okay, next question's kind of a piggyback off of the programs and initiatives, but in what ways does Energy Outreach Colorado prioritize equity and inclusion in its efforts to bridge the gap in access to sustainable energy resources? And can you provide a few examples of how these principles are incorporated into the programs and outreach efforts that Energy Outreach Colorado has?
Sure. So this is something that we're constantly working on. And I think when I came in, I've been with the organization a long time. I came in as this essentially CEO in 2018. We really did our first strategic plan at that point. Like, it's amazing how long some of those things take. And one of the main, areas that we wanted, one of the pillars, in addition to like, saving energy, running these programs well, being collaborative, was a commitment to statewide impact. And that means really thinking about all the communities across our state and how are we serving them, whether that's indigenous communities, rural versus urban, how are we serving the disability community? How are we thinking about LGBTQ households? Are we doing extra outreach to make sure all of these different communities know about, our programs? And that, has been something that we're still constantly working on. The other piece was we really started to recognize how much we needed to do in education and how that education needed to be in multiple languages. And we needed to like have focus groups to say, is this working? It's one thing. And I think this is such a mistake that we see so much in the nonprofit sector of really well-intended, individuals and groups saying, I think this will work for me. So I think it'll work for everyone, and not asking the community that we're trying so desperately to help, is this working for you? And so that's been this real intentionality, recently of the agencies that we serve, because we're, thought of as a funding partner. A lot of times we don't get authentic feedback because they don't want to lose our funding. So how do we have like third party folks do that and really get that information? How are we reaching out to participants? One of the things that we talk about is language. We used to talk about clients. Well, is that really the right language? We've been using participants. Seniors, is it really older adults? A lot of times the programming was all around low income, and we made a real effort at the state capitol and at the Public Utility Commission to change that language to income qualified instead of low income, just from a, I don't know, just an optics perspective. And like, you're othering somebody, right?
Yeah, the
In all the
labeling of
language.
it, the damage of what labels can do for sure. I get.
Right. So, enhanced commitment to data collection, data analysis, using data to prove what we're doing instead of just, making assumptions on our own, developing case studies, sharing those, how do we broad communication? And then certainly internally, we're doing a lot of work surveying staff. We've had tremendous growth. We've doubled our staff in 5 years, which is
Wow.
amazing. Our funding's gone up. We're serving more households, but as a leader of a smaller organization going to, we're still 50 employees, but it's huge. That change management is huge. And how are we embracing everyone? How are we um, trying to take everyone's, needs into consideration while we're still managing a business? These are all, every company, every organization, every family
Yeah.
is dealing with this. And I'm so grateful that there's so much more communication around it. I'm so grateful for reach and, the education, that we have to talk about it. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's uncomfortable, and that's okay. And we may have made a misstep. Let's apologize and move forward and just always be learning. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where our commitment is from a, internal perspective program, because we're operating at kind of a high
Hmm.
level. And then, I think, yeah, just trying to do better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, I feel like all organizations are always trying to do better, and it's the intention behind the impact that you're trying to create and the adaptability. And oh my gosh, this is what I thought, this is what somebody else thinks, and how can we, it's not being afraid of getting something wrong, but how do we just adjust going forward is super important.
Well, I think from my perspective as a leader, the biggest thing I've had to focus on is impact over deployment, because
Mm,
there's so much more funding coming into this space, and there's so much temptation to just check the boxes, as we
yeah,
all see, and to say, well, I know it may not be, ideal, but we just have to do this. The money has to be spent. We got to, write this report. And we really made a big change in 2018 to be participant focused over funder focused. And once you make that decision and you say, I'm willing to risk my funding
yeah,
for the integrity of what I believe is the best impact for our, the families we care so much about, it really does change how you run things. And there's a little bit of an arrogance that comes to that because we've been doing this a long time. But it's and we're going to see it more and more because there is so much money coming into this. And this is a space, once you know that, we're starting to see predatory lending practices happen, whether it's in renewable energy or rebate promises, or hey, there's like a fear aspect, you're going to get shut off unless you
yeah,
do this. And we have to be vigilant on terms of educating, branding, for the utility companies, for EOC, because when we're coming to you saying, here's something that we're giving you, there's a natural reaction of why. And
yeah.
and because this community, I think, again, disproportionately impact, however you want to define it, there's so much attention to it that there's all these efforts that have come in, and there's almost like a fatigue of,
Mm.
well, I'm the easy community, or I don't know. I'm just sensing that, and we really are trying to be sensitive around it. But it's hard when we all have goals that we're trying to meet.
Absolutely. Going off of the education that you were talking about, can you tell me a little bit more about the role that education and outreach plays in increasing awareness and participation in sustainable energy programs within Colorado? Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing there.
Well, and I'll talk a little bit about emerging strategies, but like, here's an example. This is how Coloradans heat their home currently. And so still we're predominantly natural gas. And so this is an important education piece for me, because if we say we want to eliminate gas and you reduce the supply, the price goes up. And so then that's the consequence of what we have to deal with. And so it's, again, like, understanding that can be a goal of you wanting to keep increasing the pies, in different ways, but understand what the consequences is and how do we mitigate that. And I think fundamentally, for so long, you turn on a light, you pay a bill and you don't think about it as much, except when all of a sudden you're seeing dramatic increases. And so
Mhm.
we really, I'll say too, if you think about utility companies 25 years ago, there were meter readers that were walking from door to door to read the
Yeah.
meter. They acted almost like ombudsmen to say, hey, how is this community doing? Hey, what's going on? And because these are, at least in Colorado, we have vertically integrated utilities, it's a monopoly. When you made that more efficient, where you now have technology where a car can drive by and read that meter and you don't have individuals doing it, you lose that touch with the community.
Mm.
Then when you have automated meters that now have much more like 15-minute incremental data. You have smart thermostats, you have solar panels on
Mhm.
your home, maybe you have a car that's plugged in. The utility is going to be buying that. I mean, there's a lot more of a two-way communication, but for years we kind of reduced the communication on the energy side, kind of by purpose, because we were creating efficiencies. It was saving us money. Oh, by the way, now we want you to, pay your bill online. We want it automatically to come out of your bank account.
Mhm.
Um, we're going to do all these things, and it removed that immediacy, right? Think about
Gotcha.
and again, the ages of everyone, when you were paying long distance phone calls. Like I remember, I never would ever make a long distance phone call because my father would be like, here's the bill and let me
Yeah.
show you, right? And it's a detail. And then it was nights and weekends are free. And, then it was, okay, unlimited this.
Yeah.
Well, if you think about like the technology shifts that we've had so rapidly over time, when we want to do something like, say, we want to reduce carbon, everybody needs to participate for it to work. That means you
Mhm.
have to do something differently. You have to go without, you have to struggle. And that's hard for folks, right, to do. Or you
Yeah.
have to understand it's going to cost more in order to have this other piece happening. And so I just want to point out, like when we talk about electrification is the focus. So our demand side management is essentially another word for energy efficiency. That's the map. All these different colors are the different utility companies and the different programs that we have across the state for energy efficiency. When you look at the electrification map, it's only Xcel Energy is that service
Oh,
territory, because that's where we have our funding right now to do electrification. It took us 15 years to build the demand side management maps, right? Of looking, broadly and how do we do all this? And it's going to take us, time to build out that infrastructure across the state. So that's where that education is going to be so important. Because if you're reading, electrification is great, and it is, and it's important, and we're going to see it. It's going to take time to build that out. And in order to do it, you need an electrician sometimes. You need contractors, you need equipment, you need an understanding that it's just a different technology. So that's where there's a real responsibility for people. It's just not going to happen. We have to participate in addition to all of the vendors and partners that we have doing this work.
yeah. And I think that's something I didn't even think about, that everybody's got to be on board for it to really take way. And I think it's simple education stuff like that too, that I think when you're not in the space, in any space that you work in, when you're not in that space every day, it's important to have education for
Well, I
sure.
was born in the late 60s, and I can tell you I did not wear a seatbelt most the first 10 years of my life.
Oh my gosh.
My
Yeah.
father was a smoker. He, smoked inside the house, right?
Yeah.
And then we saw, seatbelt laws. We
Hmm.
saw, the peer pressure that comes from children with anti-smoking campaigns made huge shifts. We're seeing it with recycling programs,
Hmm.
composting being more normalized, and I think the example I've been using is, working from home, no one could believe it would be as normalized as it was.
Oh
And it
my
was
gosh.
one dramatic thing that completely transformed how we think about this. This is one of those, it's great for somebody else to do it, but if it inconveniences me, right? So you have folks that have been talking about this, right?
Yeah.
Al Gore back in the day, like this is not a new idea. This has been happening, and there are people that have been trying to get this,
Yeah.
going, environmental groups for so long. And now what we're seeing is the need is accelerated. Policies are driving mandates because that's what transforms the market. And now we're in a tension around having that market transform with having people having to change either how they pay for things, what they, rates they pay for, and all that.
Absolutely. Fabulous. Okay, moving on. Are there any innovative or emerging strategies that EOC is exploring to further enhance access to sustainable energy resources for marginalized communities in Colorado?
Yeah, and this is the work we're super excited about. So we have this Healthy Homes program, and this came, I mean, I've been working on this for over a decade.
Oh my
And the
gosh.
idea is, if you think about like a prescription for home modification, like let's say you're a family where you live near Commerce City, your children have asthma, they're going to emergency rooms because the housing, that folks are living in is exacerbating their asthma. What if we could go in and do a full retrofit of their home to, improve the indoor air quality,
Mm.
the efficiency, all of these different things. So we have a pilot program happening with the city and county of Denver. We've been doing it for several years, but we get referrals from places like Children's Hospital, National Jewish Clinic at Tepeyac, where we can, target households that we know have high energy usage, can really receive the benefits. The healthcare partners are providing the sort of health analysis and improvements. We did some of this work in Elyria, Swansea a couple of years ago when I-70 was being buried, and there was so much impact in that neighborhood that we did full mitigation, replaced all the windows, we added air conditioning, we've done, energy assistance. So it was super exciting. And I'm just going to give you an example of one of our recent projects just to show you the challenge that comes from this.
Mm-hmm.
So the measures installed, the air sealing, weather stripping, low cost fixtures, those are historically our energy efficiency work that we do. That's kind of standard in every home. What's in orange is what we're doing to electrify those homes. So we're
Mm.
putting in heat pumps, pulling out natural gas. We're putting in heat pump hot water heaters. So not only are you heating with electricity, but your hot water. Sometimes you may have an electric heat, but gas hot water, we're taking out all the gas, again, putting in an electric clothes dryer. Having, to upgrade the panel to be able to absorb that additional electricity coming into your home. If it's an older home, you have to maybe replace the knob and tube wiring that, just you want to reduce any fire. You're putting in an induction stove, an induction cooktop, which is an amazing technology. Then the healthy piece of it is all the second part of it: pest control, mold. If you're not using like your bath fan correctly, carpet removal in a lot of cases. If you think about, if you have really old carpet that's absorbing maybe pets, maybe
Yeah.
smoke, maybe other things, that stays there, right? Like HEPA vacuums, purifiers. So when we do this in the average home in Denver, it's $72,000. And
Wow.
so again, and we're learning, right?
Mhm.
Because I think we also have an HGTV mentality of, oh, I can go in and fix my home immediately and it's magical. But this is multiple visits from multiple contractors. It can be really challenging.
Totally.
Um, we have utility rebates, we have funding from the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. And then the most, transformative is the sales tax that was voted on by voters in Colorado to create funding for the climate and sustainability programs within Denver. So, and we also have funding from, national organizations, because it's such a critical thing. We've seen some of this work happening like in Baltimore or Philadelphia that came out of the lead mitigation work, because we know what damage lead can do. And we don't have as much of that in Colorado, just because the housing, the paint in our housing stock, isn't as old as in some of those communities. So we're learning from other communities, seeing what's happening. The other just super innovative thing we're doing is community solar. So this is like, if you think of solar panels on your house, community solar gardens or whatever, there's different names for it, is that they're larger scale panels. And if you look at this, like you have different households are getting a different share of that
Yeah.
panel. So we act as a subscriber organization and partner with developers. And so we are essentially identifying the household. So when someone comes in for bill payment assistance or crisis intervention, we know they are struggling with their utility bill.
Yeah.
So let's get them, go through efficiency, and then let's make sure they have long-term affordability with these community solar garden subscriptions. So it's really exciting. We're managing 7 megawatts right now, and just the subscriber savings. We have like this database, that is showing the savings that we have for households and how many megawatts we're managing. And what we're going to see over the next couple of years is going from 7 to 70. So it's a tenfold
Wow.
increase. So we'll be seeing significant increases. This is a garden that's with Pivot Energy, which is one of our partners, that was dedicated to a woman who passed away, who had been a really, dedicated solar advocate. And so it's really an interesting way to, help people access, a renewable energy asset, and to, just think about a new way of delivering programs.
Yeah, and I mean, I know solar is an expensive investment, so
Right.
figuring out the ways to get people involved, even if it's like small chunks, like I like that graphic that you had with the different families on there. I didn't even think about that, but that's a great way. Again, when you get everybody behind it, no matter if it's a big chunk that you're contributing or a small, it's getting everybody on board with it. This is awesome though, and I can't believe how much it's increased. Like, that's so crazy. This is really, really cool though. Okay, this is kind of piggybacking off of these new initiatives, but looking ahead, what are the long-term goals and aspirations of Energy Outreach Colorado in terms of advancing sustainability and energy equity for all residents of Colorado?
Yeah, so at this point, we're really just scaling. How do we scale these programs? We've been running them for a long time. How do we take the ideas that we have and encourage other partners? We work really closely with, for example, the African American Trade Association and getting their members who, trained on heat pump installation. We have a new workforce development staff member. We just have to keep educating,
Yeah,
keep spreading. And then we're doing tons of advocacy work in the space. So, in intervening in all the different cases, monitoring, just how do we, our goal is, if ratepayers are going to pay for it, how do we maximize
yeah,
that income qualified households get the most?
fabulous. As individuals, what actions can we take to support the mission of Energy Outreach Colorado, and how can we contribute to promoting sustainability and energy equity in our communities?
So really, go to our website. We have tons of information on there. Connect individuals to our program if you know anyone that needs assistance. We have a toll-free heat helpline that we work in conjunction with the Department of Human Services. The LEAD program ends April 30th. And so then our program is available May 1st through October 30th. Yeah, through October 31st.
Well,
Read your bill. I think people need to look at this, and if you look at the back of your bill, it's in like 4-point font, all the different line items. Every single line item on your bill is coming from a piece of legislation.
mm,
So there is a huge connection in this. And so educate yourself. Go, if you haven't accessed your online portal, look at all the programs that are available. There's new calculators to say, what your home can do. The Public Utility Commission has a new energy equity program that's coming out of legislation from 2021. There's a lot of effort in this space. The Colorado Energy Office and the Energy Equity Fund, so there's a lot happening. And
mhm.
so I think there's so much education that we can do for ourselves, and then just keep your eyes open. I hope after this you'll start thinking about things maybe a little differently when you read an article and understand what's the perspective. Like, if you're only hearing from oil and gas and they're
Yeah,
demonizing the fact that we're trying to transform our economy, I think the more sophisticated players understand, how this is transforming, and we have a ton of support that comes from that community because they understand, what we do. And on the opposite side, if you have environmental communities that are just demonizing, we have to still have affordable natural gas for the next couple of years or decades
yeah,
because we still heat our homes with it.
yeah.
And so there has to be a balance. There's a reasonableness. And we know, and I think that's what I just want people thinking about it. It's a very nuanced conversation. It's
Mhm.
not black and white. Communities are different, just like there's good, players in any business. There's other folks, and we can't just think about it one way.
Yeah, and the well-rounded educating yourself around it is important too, absolutely. Would you recommend any other organizations or resources that our audience can connect with, both inside Colorado and also nationally, to further their efforts in promoting sustainable energy access and equity?
Yes. So I focus on Colorado, but So some of our key partners are like Energy Resource Center and some of the weatherization agencies. Sometimes it's a county, like Pueblo or Arapahoe County run their own programs for multiple counties. Groundwork Denver, Mile High Youth Corps, Grid Alternatives is amazing, doing all kinds of innovative, focus on this work. On the environmental justice side, Green Latinos is doing a ton of work.
Wow.
Women from the Mountains, Solar United Neighborhoods. Nationally, it's groups like Sierra Club, Environmental Defense Fund, National Resource Defense Council, Conservation Colorado.
Mhm.
There's so many places where you can, depending on your interests and where you want to get involved in this space. And I think, just again, how do we bring equity into
Mhm.
this conversation? And I think it's, we have to understand that we can't economically devastate while we're trying to do good. So these are some
Absolutely.
suggestions.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing those. I'm definitely going to look into these as well.
And that's
And
my
then,
email if anyone.
oh, yay, perfect. Good little display there. Fabulous. Any last words from you, Jennifer, that you want us to really take away from this conversation? Any resources that you think are important for our audience to access? I know they can go through the presentation, but anything that maybe wasn't mentioned that you feel is important?
It's hard to to cover it all. I do think just educating yourself. We have a lot of different programs within our state and in our communities that work on this, and so there's a place to and nationally. And
Yeah,
I think understanding it from your own personal perspective, really understanding what your passion is around this, and then finding the right resource. Again, just getting involved, I think is
yeah.
really, really important. And I think there's going to be so much change coming, and I think we have to just keep readying ourselves. And the technology that's going to really solve this problem, we probably don't even know what it is yet.
Yeah.
And I am going to say this out loud, although this is funny. I want people to start thinking about like having an open mind to alternative technologies like nuclear energy. The
Hmm.
nuclear energy of today is very different than 50 years ago. If you think about it, it's just chemistry, right? You're taking molecules, you're separating out carbon. We're seeing more uses for like aluminum, ammonia in,
Yeah,
energy production. And so it's a lot of the NIMBYism that's going to come from this, right? We're starting even to see it in the solar, where it's getting harder to cite solar because people maybe don't want it right
yeah.
behind them, or wind. And I think we have to just recognize um, what's our role in it, how do we get involved in it, and keep an open mind.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Jennifer. I really appreciate it. Thank you for creating that presentation. I'm so excited about that. I feel like I learned a lot. And thank you to everybody that listened in. Also, we have our Facebook Live audience, so thank you to all of you. That was it.
Great.